They get scared away?
Good evening. Welcome to the Fitchburg Municipal Airport Commission meeting for January 19th, 2023. The public's invited to participate in the Zoom webinar. If anybody would like to speak on any item that's not on the agenda, they can have 2 minutes to comment on any subject they would like. Moving forward, let me introduce the members in attendance. To my left, Beth Walsh, Commissioner Walsh. Via Zoom, Commissioner David Genesi. And to my right is Commissioner Richard Liberatore. I also have, and myself, Clayton Raymond, Chairman. I also have in attendance Peter Kettle, Airport Manager, Solicitor Pusateri, and the Mayor, Stephen DiNatale. We're going to start off with previous month's minutes approval and/or any special meeting minutes. There was no special meeting minutes, so do I have a motion to approve last month's minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Vote?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Item 1 is action items from previous minutes. It's my understanding that we are going to cover all action items moving forward.
That is correct.
Yeah, I'll skip that. Well, Peter, correspondence to the commission. I do not have any. Does Peter?
Yes, we do. As you know, in the past years, actually prior to COVID and after COVID, we've had the Wings and Wheels event, usually in April. And the Wings and Wheels have actually contacted me, Brian Richter, who's the president of the association, asking if they could please have the Wings and Wheels event on April the 30th of this year. And it'll be actually setting up on the 29th and the event on the 30th. And that will bring to the airport $4,000, $2,000 a day.
So the runway remains open?
The runway remains, the whole airport remains open.
Yeah, and they know how to apply and insurances and all that other stuff?
They do.
They're going to go through you?
They will.
Yeah.
And if you approve it today, then I will contact the FAA and MassDOT Aeronautics to get their approval as well.
Well, I certainly have no problem with it. I'll motion to move forward with Wings and Wheels for April the 30th, which involves 2 days, 29th and the 30th.
I can second.
Vote, please.
All right?
So, yeah, go right ahead, Peter.
Okay,
Do what
thank
need
you.
to do. Item 3, Gail, review of ongoing work. I see Gail is not present tonight. Peter, do you know the status of Gail?
I do.
Okay.
They apologize for not being here, but due to the inclement weather, they thought it was better that they didn't come. And to be honest, they had nothing to offer for this particular meeting. As you know, the EA and the wildlife assessment, we're actually waiting for the money from the bill grants, and that's from the FAA, so there's still no forwardness on that at the moment. But other than that, the Gale review, ongoing work is happening, and there's basically no update.
Yeah.
So,
Waiting for the feds.
yes.
Thank you, Peter. Item 4. Item 4 is Fitchburg Pilots Association. Did you, any,
There is, but
Anything
we've just covered it because the Wings and Wheels, the FPA is the Wings.
Yeah.
And that's all taking place with Dan and Mark Estabrook over there from the FACT.
okay.
So that's all in hand, and as I said, I've just got to get the approval from MassDOT and the FAA.
Item 5, new business. Item 1 is no new business.
Correct.
Were you just checking me?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Item 6, old business. Item A, GPU installation.
The GPU installation is now commencing the 30th of January, week commencing the 30th. It should take maybe 3 days.
Oh, good.
So,
Item B, Hangar 1 agreement. We were waiting for solicitor's office on sending them a 555 agreement or something like that?
plus a get-out clause. It's
And
being
again-
worked on at the moment, and you can
Yeah.
put that in B and C. They are being worked on at the moment.
Attorney Busateri, you have your...
I gotta get back to it. There's the get-out clause is what is holding it up, and it's a small linchpin. I just got to pull on it. It'll come.
I'm going to put you down for an action item,
Yes,
so you be ready.
I will.
I know you will. Item C, Twin City Air Motive Agreement. It's the same.
It is.
They're in Hangar 1, correct?
No, they're in Hangar 7.
Hangar 7, okay.
I just would say that the manager did follow up with me on that a couple of times during the intervening period, and I've got to make it a priority, and I got to get to it.
Yep. Item D, minimum standards, item 2.3. What is item 2.3?
Item 2.3 on the minimum standards is the change that I proposed to go from $1 million liability insurance to $2 million liability insurance.
Yeah.
And the chairman of the FACT actually said, well, what do we need? What is it? What does it mean? Well, I did some investigation, and basically, if you are, the coverage for an airport is based on three things. Airport operations, premises liability. This is a slip and fall coverage. It provides coverage for third-party bodily injury and property damage arising from the ownership, maintenance, or use of the airport and all operations necessary thereto. Item 2 is products completed operations. This provides coverage for third-party bodily injury and property damage arising from goods or products manufactured, sold, handled, or distributed by the named insured if the occurrence occurs after possession of such goods or products has been relinquished to others by the normal injured. And service operations of the name insured if the occurrence takes place for service operations have been completed. And then finally, item 3 is the hangar keeper liability. This means pay on behalf of the insured all sums which the insured shall become legally obligated to pay because of property damage to aircraft which are the property of others and in the care of custody or control of the named insured, but only while such aircraft are not in flight. And basically what they were saying is that the minimum premium on this type of insured policy can vary between $6,000 to $8,000 to get that policy.
For $1 million policy?
Yes,
Or,
for $1 million policy.
yeah.
For $1 million policy. And just to let you know, I had the occasion to see somebody else working on the airport this week, and I approached that person, and I actually said, it was good to see you, and beg your pardon, sorry, let me go through this first. It was Eckhard Strater. He's the avionics guy, and I actually didn't recognize him. I just said hello, and I saw him in the hangar and just walked straight past. And I thought, during my dreams, Eckhard came to my attention, and I wrote him this email the following morning, and I said, "Good morning, Eckhard. It was a surprise to see you today, but last night I realized and remembered who you were. However, Eckhard, the City and the Airport Commission have requested me to update the Fitchburg minimum standards, which were first published in 1973 and added to the airport documents, including leases. Said standards advised, amongst other things, any person wishing to do work on the airport must have adequate insurance and be approved by the Airport Commission to work on the airport. Approval can be achieved by a request in writing or at the monthly Airport Commission meeting. If you have not completed the job you were working on yesterday, please do so." I didn't expect him just to leave an aircraft that couldn't fly. So I said, please complete the job. The next time you're required to do work on any aircraft at the Fitchburg Municipal Airport, please obtain permission from the Airport Commission and provide proof of insurance accordingly. Now, I actually saw Eckhard on the airport again today. And I spoke to him, and I've just sent this email to him. And I said, "Good afternoon, Eckhard. It was good to see you and to discuss my below-mentioned email with you this afternoon. Thank you for advising that you do meet the minimum standards published in 1973 in that you have a $1 million liability insurance as required by the Fitchburg Municipal Airport and also as required by Garmin, who you represent. As such, and as discussed and agreed, would you please send a copy of the insurance certificate to my email address, bkettle@fitchburgma.gov, either this evening when you return home or tomorrow morning when able. As advised, we are currently looking at updating the minimum standards that have been in operation for circa 50 years, and we'll keep you posted on the outcome of the meetings currently ongoing. We look forward to and welcome seeing you working on the airport going forwards. Many thanks, Peter." So Eckhard's, we're happy to let him come into the airport because he has the appropriate insurance. I just wanted to bring that up to you. Okay? And the other one I've already read out, which is what the requirements are, which Eckhard complies to.
Yeah.
So I guess it's over to...
So this is still an open item. We plan on having it an open item for another 2 months. If anybody on the commission would like to comment, let's hear it. Business as usual. Mark. You are now. Yeah.
Good evening. Mark Estabrook, FACT President, FPA member. So speaking on behalf of the FPA and the FACT, you were gracious enough to give us some time to work on these standards at the last commission meeting, which we appreciated. I wanted to give you a quick update on where we're at. Your request at that time was that we edit the existing copy rather than sort of give you a list of the things we were interested in. In reviewing the details of that, and we are progressing it, our viewpoint is that the standards as written are substantially based on a 1950s environment. I appreciate they were updated in 73 or 74, but the updates appear to be very minor. So the way it was written was probably fine in the 1950s, but we don't believe it's applicable today. The airport manager was given the direction, if I understood it correctly, to make absolutely the only necessary changes for the recent updates. And what I'm suggesting to you is, from our perspective, there's a lot of changes in there that we're facing that we think need to be updated. So I wanted to forewarn you of that. And some of the reasons are the current minimum standards draft does not reflect the current operations at Fitchburg. So while the draft allows grandfathering of these existing FBOs in terms of their license coverage, in terms of their operations, their square footage, all the rest of it, grandfathering it since 1954, if that's when it was done, doesn't seem appropriate. In fact, there's a clause in the minimum standards that states that upon update of these standards, everyone needs to comply. So you might be grandfathered in initially, but you don't get to keep that grandfathering as edits go on. So there's some disconnects there. So we propose that the minimum standards be drafted to reflect the current accepted operations at Fitchburg. We assume you're happy with the FBOs and the flight school, et cetera, that's on the field today, and the standards ought to reflect what those operations are and then apply to everyone else who wants to come on board and build a hangar and have similar operations, so you have a level playing field. So that's just our perspective. We also propose that the draft language get a little more clear and a little more supportive of the off-field services. In the case of Eckhart, Peter, I take your comments well. I think it's worth noting that Eckhart works under Twins Airmotive, so he has a substantial business on the field that's ongoing. He basically is the avionics arm for the Twins Airmotive facility, who are not avionics folks. They do airframe aircraft maintenance, so they need someone who can do that for them. So they're not typical of the type of person that we've referred to. You've seen other residents of Fitchburg talk about people who can work on fabric aircraft or specialty aircraft. Okay. So some examples of where the current standards don't match up with what we have on the field today. We can take flight schools as an example. The current standards require that they operate 8 hours a day, 7 days a week with somebody on site. Today we connect very efficiently with flight schools. We have web-based services. We have phones. We Flight schools work things out with their students when they're scheduled. You don't necessarily have to have an office open all day long. The standards require 12,000 square feet of space to house that flight school. Clearly, the current flight school doesn't meet that, and it doesn't really need to. They don't really need to own their own aircraft. I mean, that's sort of a debatable point. Right now, the standards require that. I think it's at least one, maybe two aircraft must be owned by the flight school. That can be a challenge for some flight schools. Leasebacks are quite common today. There's also a requirement that a flight simulator, a certified flight simulator, be available. That's kind of a business decision. Not all flight schools have those things. I don't know if we really want to enforce that at Fitchburg. It raises the standard, certainly, the capability of the flight school that's on the field, but is it justifiable for the level of business that's ongoing at Fitchburg? It's an open question. Airframe and power plant repair and maintenance. We have 3 businesses that are operating at Fitchburg quite successfully. None of them meet the current standards. The residents of Fitchburg have relied for decades on specialty A&Ps, IAs, airframe power plant work, particularly annual inspections, preventative maintenance work, and the language in the current standards, of course, doesn't support that very well. So we're trying to write draft language around how that could be better supported that everyone can agree on. Other things that are not meeting the standards that actually happen today: avionics services, banner towing, flight training. Aside from the current FCA, there's actually individuals who will do flight training, engine repair and tuning, and private charter work that's ongoing on the field today. None of those things are well framed, if we will, for consistency in how rules are applied. So those are the things we're working through, and as I said, we are making good progress on them, so I just wanted to give you an update as to where we're at and the kinds of things we were looking at. And Peter offered a good suggestion that I'll bring to the table, which is, as I mentioned, we are making a lot of changes. I don't know what is most convenient for you in terms of reviewing those changes, whether it's to come here and present them, whether it's even if you have the ability to do a working group off the regular commission meeting. We're open to work with you in whatever way is comfortable and convenient. So it's a really open question to you all.
Yeah, so I read the same thing you did on the flight school. It almost seems like they were trying to mimic what was there as almost a protectionism. So from my viewpoint, I think what the city is, or the airport would like to avoid, is somebody setting up a flight school out of a Connex for 2 days a week. We're just not interested in that.
Sure.
Okay, so maybe that was what they were trying to accomplish back in 1973. But you're right. It gets specific and says, 6 days a week or 7 days a week and a desk and all that other stuff. So, yeah, I don't argue the fact that needs some polishing up.
Yeah. And the other thing you got to remember is that these are the minimum standards, the threshold that you want to set. If anybody's coming on the grounds with any sort of building, Connex or otherwise, they've got to have a ground lease, right? At least a ground lease if it's a mobile, and a building lease if it's not. And a lease affords you that additional control to, exactly as you're saying, set those standards. So you do have mechanisms. I think with the minimum standards, it's dangerous to try and put everything in there, because then we run into this situation exactly.
Yeah.
But as times change, you can adjust the lease to accommodate that. Yeah.
The other subject of insurance, or is it SOSAs?
SASOs, yep, SASO.
So this common theme of a $1 million policy is starting to appear. And we as the commission are going to get advice from the attorney and Mr. Kettle. And it may be more than $1 million by the time we're done. And you had mentioned last meeting about a policy greater than $1 million is not feasible or not possible.
For an independent contractor, yes.
For an independent contractor. And then you went into, which Peter answered earlier, as to specific what insurance need to happen. Peter and I had a conversation earlier this afternoon, and like the Wings and Wheels, they're going to be coming in for 2 days. And they have, we haven't seen the policy, but they have explained to us they have a $2 million policy for the week. I mean, is it possible for someone to have a $2 million policy to do work on the airport for 30 days or 90 days, or during the winter months when these annuals become due? Now, again, I'm trying. I know that, you know, there's FBOs on the airport that are not going to be happy with these words. But the fact is, I cannot select who can come on and who can't. We can only set policy for minimum standards,
Right.
such as this liability requirement. You know, it's becoming. There was more than just the avionics guy in the last couple of months that had been on the field doing work, and both of them have $1 million insurance. So it seems to be going down that road.
So ultimately, it's the commission's choice as to what that level is set at.
Yeah.
We're simply presenting arguments for different circumstances.
Yeah.
And when an IA comes in to do an inspection of something which is already done, what's the risk of that inspection? So we'll make arguments about those levels, but I appreciate at the end of the day, it's going to be your option. All we can do is provide as good a data as we can provide and a justification for why we think this is going to happen and what we think the consequences will be if we don't support these things. Yeah, but there are, I mean, there's several insurance types of insurance that the airport manager just listed. They don't all apply in all situations. Hangar keeper's insurance doesn't apply if you're not housing someone's aircraft.
Yeah.
Why would you?
Yeah.
Right?
Again, I am not an insurance professional. I'm just trying to get the right, bring these subjects up so that the attorney has some insight as to what direction we're trying to go in, and like you said in previous meeting is, let's make it $10 million and we can all sleep well at night. Unfortunately, no one would be on the airfield.
Right.
So.
I didn't say that, did I?
Anyone else?
The attorney's spoken to his side as well. Maybe he wants to comment.
Let's find out. Solicitor Pusateri.
I'm sorry, I thought you said that I said we needed $10 million.
No, that was a joke.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Now we're going to get back to real life.
No, I really have nothing to add. I think Peter had some recent progress on it. I conferred with our insurance advisor with the city, and they gave us a recommendation. I think there was some discussion about the Massachusetts Tort Claims Act. I think I missed that last meeting. And the Massachusetts Tort Claims Act isn't going to cover every type of liability that could come up, particularly between a landlord and a tenant. So in often cases, that's what we're seeing. And I have provisions in our lease to try to preserve the protections of the Massachusetts Tort Claims Act. I just can't look into the future and figure out how successful those things are. So I don't see the Massachusetts Tort Claims Act as resolving the level of need for insurance. However, with that being said, I think Peter's found some more information, and we just need to come to something that's affordable that we can keep moving forward. So.
Sure, but you bring up a good point. The tort claims limitation and city limitations in general apply in certain circumstances. And to be clear, I'm not an insurance expert either. We're all learning as we go here.
Yes.
So if I say something stupid, I'll apologize in advance. So when you're a lessor and you have a lessee, then there's a different mechanism as I understand it. So we go back to situations like Eckhart or other folks who are coming on site who are not leasing land or buildings from the airport. And so as my understanding is the tort or other limitations would apply. So you would want a different insurance level depending on whether you're a lessee or not. So, yet another thing to consider.
Yeah.
Right. And to balance, as you said, it's a balance here against risk for the city and the airport versus having a functional and thriving airport. And, there's no clear black and white line, so we just keep working at it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your reading through those minimum standards, reading through the FAA, I'll just call it, they tend to contradict themselves right from the first sentence.
They do.
So we're on our own, as Mr. Shuffles once said. The FAA is not going to help you.
No, but I think they do provide
guide
some
us.
guidance, yeah.
And that's where we're at.
Right. And as I often tell my constituents, my friends, I'd rather be flying, but here we are. So
Yes.
we'll get through it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
We have William Taylor who would like to talk.
Bill Taylor?
Yep.
Okay, on minimum standards?
I believe so.
Okay. Let's,
He's unmuted.
1 moment, please. Mr. Taylor? I'm sorry, we don't hear you yet. Give us a minute.
Should I go and ask Dan to see?
Okay,
his
here he is. I think he should be on in a minute.
Can you hear me now, Commissioner?
Yes, we have you. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, thank you for, first off, for facilitating my participation via Zoom. I appreciate that very much. I did have, firstly, a comment on the minimum standards matter, just to reiterate the points made by Mr. Estabrook, and in particular with regards to the differentiation of different levels of insurance depending on the type of activity that may be undertaken on the field. Mark made that point. Attorney Pusateri made the point that there may be, areas or times when we need, when the airport requires more insurance. I can appreciate that, but there may also be times when the airport requires less insurance, and I think we need to bear in mind that these standards do represent minimums, and that if the goal is to promote safety of aviation and promote the largest amount of choice for users of the airport, not just existing users, but future users, then I think it's wise to look at the minimum that's required for each type of service that may be undertaken. So I just wanted to make that point. And then I did want to raise one other issue, but it was earlier on the agenda, and I wasn't sure how to jump into this, so I don't want to take you out of order, Mr. Chairman, but I did have one other matter to raise with regards to correspondence.
Okay, what are you taking out of order? Are we covering that this evening?
Well, you covered correspondence to the Commission under item number 2, and I just wanted to ask a question with regards to that.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, I just wanted to ask if the Commission was in receipt of the email correspondence that I sent to the Commission, in particular to Commissioner Walsh, in response to her questions at the last meeting in December. I did send that information via email to both Peter and those commissioners that I had emails for back in December, and I wanted to just get acknowledgement that that was indeed received. And then secondly, I did send some correspondence dated Monday, January 16th to Attorney Pollock in response to her most recent correspondence to me, and I wanted to just get acknowledgement that that too has been received. We've had some challenges getting materials back and forth between us, as evidenced by the statements I made at the last meeting with that letter that we did not receive until quite late in the process here. So I just more or less, we don't have to get into any of the detail that I've sent. I just wanted to get acknowledgement that all of that material has been received by the Airport Commission and by the airport.
Yeah, so I can't speak for Beth. I received the reiteration of the points you made last meeting. I think Beth was on that, CC'd as well.
Yeah, I received it, and I thought I had acknowledged it, and if I hadn't, I apologize for that.
And Attorney Pollack has received the information as well, and we are requesting, or she is requesting to meet on the, she wrote the 24th of December. She met the 24th of January. So if you could get back to Attorney Pollack on that, we'd be more than happy to meet.
Okay, that sounds good. I did cover that off in the email that I sent to you, Chairman, and to Peter, Manager Peter Kettle, and also to Attorney Pollack that I sent out on Monday. So
Yep.
It's covered off in that letter. So if you can just have a look at that email, that should cover it. And once again, once we get all the information that we've asked about, we'd be happy to meet.
Yeah, we are compiling that as we speak, and we should have that, before that meeting, we will have that.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
That's all I had, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see, well, maybe we didn't have you on when correspondence to the commission, but we didn't see a hand up.
I didn't see a hand.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much, Bill.
Harris Nikitas is on, but he didn't raise his hand. I don't know if he wants to speak.
Mr. Nikitas would like to speak?
I don't know if he wants to. He's on here, but I don't know if he wants to
He
speak.
can speak on minimum standards if he'd like. We're still on minimum standards. It's a little cumbersome doing it off-site, isn't it?
I think it's getting there. I just made him a panelist, but
Pick another check for Slattery's.
I don't believe he wants to speak.
I don't think he wants to speak.
Okay.
Okay.
We're going to move on to item E. I'm sorry. Yes. Please just state your name and what town you reside.
I'm glad I drove in, judging by the Zoom results. My name is Greg Dinning. I live in Shirley. I have an aircraft on the field in one of the T hangars. 2 points. I'm probably a little over my head here.
We all are. Yeah, don't worry. Could you bring the microphone just a little closer? Yes,
Sorry.
soft-spoken.
And I have not been speaking with Mr. Estabrook closely. I think he knows my situation, but,
Yeah.
but I'm not involved in the details of their planning. I do have 2 points that might be a little more interesting than I was expecting. The first is just to pile on the comment about that other people have said about bringing mechanics on the field. I also have a specialty aircraft. I've used Twin City before. They're excellent mechanics. They aren't particularly knowledgeable in my airplane type. It's definitely desirable for me to be able to go off the field. I use a mechanic at Nashua. He knows my airplane type. And I have never asked him to come onto the field to do things. They've been routine enough to use Twin City, but I would like that option. If I cannot bring him in to do work on it, that's an issue with me as a user of the airport.
Yep.
I told him about the $2 million liability, and he basically laughed at me. So I don't think he's a candidate for that. I'm not actually sure if he has $1 million. I don't think he does. The other is maybe a little more interesting. I also have sort of a special situation, which is probably worth bringing up. I am a flight instructor. I am currently trying to set up a business to offer specialty flight instruction as a single-member LLC. I would like to do it at Fitchburg. The idea would be I would meet people at the terminal or in the parking lot, bring them to my T hangar, do some ground instruction, go flying, come back, do some more ground instruction, they leave. It's not a great thing to do in the winter, but it's a perfectly feasible operation for probably 9 months of the year. It's worth explaining a little bit about what this is, if you'll bear with me. It's very specialty training that basically most of it's going to be advanced safety training. You cannot get this anywhere else in New England. You used to be able to. The schools that used to offer it have pretty much shut down. It's kind of hard to make money at it. You basically can't make money at it. I'm planning to do it essentially as a hobby job and as a service to the aviation community. It's very expensive for various reasons, and if I don't lose money, I'll be pretty happy about it. I've checked with an insurance agent offering standard business liability insurance, general insurance, and it would probably, to get this kind of insurance to operate, it would probably raise my costs by about 10 to 15%. If I didn't charge it and just absorb the cost, it would come straight out of my pocket. If I did add that to my fees, I kind of suspect I'd end up losing that much money in lost business, because it's about at the edge where I have to charge as much as the market will bear. You can do it better in Florida or Arizona, but we aren't there. So I'm not sure this requirement would allow me to operate in Fitchburg at all. The alternative, just to point it out, would probably be Nashua. They have no such restrictions there. I've talked to the airport manager. He thinks it'd be a great idea. The question I kind of have here is, what does this insurance do for anybody? What risk is my operation? Well, actually, I'm going to back up a second. You mentioned something a little bit ago about you weren't really interested in the 2 days a week people to come in and do flight instruction when you were talking about the flight schools. I guess the first question is, should I even be thinking about this? Am I welcome at Fitchburg? Is this according to your view of the airport? And the second is simply, what risk am I to the city and to the airport that I should have to incur this cost? I mean, I don't get what my business is gonna
Right.
do for you,
Right.
do against you.
So Peter and I spoke again this afternoon. So here's the deal. We have a 20, or let's bring the numbers down, $18 million Challenger on the ramp. You drive onto the ramp, it's an icy day. You drive into the plane. Now what?
Are you asking me?
It's a scenario. This is what's going through our heads. It's like,
okay, how does this?
Anything can happen on the airport, and it's from driving through the gate onto the airplane, onto the ramp, into a hangar. I guess this is called the slip and fall insurance, right? So that's where we're at.
Why does it differ from every other user of the airport?
Well, it don't. Every other user has insurance.
The people who own airports?
I should say business at the airport.
Yeah, it's not clear why the kind of business I have is any additional risk. I don't get it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't have an answer for you at this moment.
Basically, people are going to be escorted by me through the security gate to the parking next to the hangar. We walk into my hangar. I think if they trip over the threshold of the door, that's probably my problem. If they bang their head on my airplane.
I'd like to think so, but in reality, it becomes the city's problem.
I don't see why the kind of, I mean, if you're doing a mechanics shop, I can see how they can blow things up and burn things down, but I just don't see why this requires the level of insurance that you're asking here. I don't see why it requires any level, but that's a different question.
Attorney Pusateri, do you think you could chime in on that? Like, he brought up an interesting point. If you're going flying and you've invited 2 friends to go flying with you, those 2 friends take their personal car onto the airport. We don't know their names. How are they insured? About how do we handle that?
Yeah, so I mean, I would think motor vehicle insurance would come in there. Of course, your minimum coverage, I think, is 40/20.
Yeah, not a lot.
So not a lot there. So if there was an automobile accident, I think you'd probably be looking at that. But so the scenarios that I think we've been talking about is repair-related scenarios for damages.
Yeah.
And, you know, I am no better an insurance expert than anybody else that we're talking about, and all I can say is the city hired Judy Kokinda. I can't remember the name of the organization that she's with. Their organization's been advising us on insurance over the last several years. As soon as this dispute came up, we just contacted her. And, you know, her advice was, you know, $1 to $2 million. $2 million is reasonable. We're in, you know, it's in a different world right now. The gentleman is, what kind of threat is the gentleman to cause the city? I'm more worried about, I'm mostly concerned about tenants filing suit against the city for failure to take whatever the appropriate steps to police this type of activity, or promoting the activity, or somehow encouraging the activity or participating in the activity. So, you know, we just want to have that insurance. When Judy explained it to me, if I can convey it to you, the best off of my memory, it's a conversation I had some months ago, so I don't have it on full command of my faculties anymore, never mind at any earlier time. But the primary concern is the landlord-tenant liability, and that's kind of what we keep looking at. So we have a responsibility to tenants. If tenants are damaged because of activity that we're permitting on their premises, and that's our responsibility. So I don't know what the current pricing. I heard Peter read some prices for the $1 million coverage versus the $2 million coverage, and it sounds to me there's a threshold somewhere in there, and got to arrive at it.
Yeah, I guess my basic point is what I'm planning on doing is essentially indistinguishable from taking a friend flying from the point of view of any external observer.
Yeah.
I'm signing their logbook, but that's about it, and that city doesn't care about that. So I don't see why this kind of activity would be applicable. And there's a couple of others. There's the banner towing, which I'm not going to speak about him because it's not my business. Yeah. People come in and do detailing of airplanes, things like that. I just don't see how imposing this requirement on people is going to do anything except drive away a lot of the foundation of grassroots aviation. I mean, if you want to become Hanscom or Manchester, this is a pretty good way of doing it. Okay,
so we certainly appreciate your comments. We're going to write these comments down, and we're going to consider everything.
Okay. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you. Now we're moving on to item E, mass development. Mary Jo.
Thank you. Mary Jo Bohart, Economic Development Director for the City of Fitchburg. And I wanted to let, I guess, probably Commissioner Walsh know that there are 3 folks, or maybe it's just 2, in the waiting room. One would be Luke Mitchell of Vanessa Hagen-Bressler, or VHB, I should say, and then Randall Wiedemann. So if they could be unmuted, that would be helpful. What I wanted to explain, and the commissioners know, but just for the sake of anyone who wasn't in attendance or hasn't seen the November meeting, the city of Fitchburg was fortunate to be the recipient of a grant from state agency Mass Development for $100,000 worth of professional services that will assist in analyzing the land use redevelopment potential of the portions of industrial land at the airport that were the former Crosswinds runway, but also have been identified as not needed or not useful for aviation purposes. And so these consulting firms that Mass Development has paired us with have expertise in looking at this, and the intent of the project, which has been going on for a few months, was to provide analysis, conceptual layouts, and ultimately some reports that would serve as guides for the commissioners, for the city, moving from here forward as maybe proposers come to you looking to use that land, or you make decisions about that land. In the November meeting, we had a slide presentation by Luke Mitchell of VHB, which presented the various concepts in kind of a layout form, and it talked about constraints and that sort of thing. Randall Wiedemann was a part of that meeting, but what had not been presented to you in November, which we now have and we've provided to you, is a finished report by Randall, which is more of an economics analysis of the airport, its current operations, and also numerically what could come from some of these reuse options. So we have Randall remotely. We have Luke Mitchell. We also may have Amanda Gregoire from Mass Development sort of as a wrap-up. She's on another Zoom meeting right now, but basically I just wanted to acknowledge her and her agency because they were the funding source. And I think that what we're starting to see from this exercise, what's come out of it, hopefully will be very valuable. But I wanted to hand it over to Randall, if I could, simply because when he presented in the November meeting, you didn't have the benefit of the analytical report. And so, Randall, perhaps you could maybe take the commissioners through what you've presented in the report that we've now given to them. And then certainly if the commissioners have any questions, that will be, you can answer them as well.
I'm not sure, do we have a slide deck that we can go through? I mean, Luke, it may be, my updated material is in that slide deck, and most of the updated material that we have from our standpoint involve the tax, putting the new tax rate in and discussing, what the options were from a financial standpoint for the various economic development ideas that VHB came up with.
Randall, if I could just jump in one sec, I'm glad you mentioned that. One thing which was the difference between the material presented in November and then what you received probably very late December, early January, was we, the city, had our tax classification hearing. We established our new tax rate, and that tax rate was an assumption. And so we wanted to make sure that the reports, once they are sort of finalized, we're using the very latest tax rate, and so that has now been reflected.
Right. So, given that sort of background, how much do you need reworking and maybe Luke? I mean, if you need Luke to take you through the options, and then we can discuss the financials. It's up to you what you want to hear.
I would defer to the chair, but my initial instinct was to skip through the conceptual layouts unless the group wants to revisit them again because they've had a month or so to chew and digest and think about it, and maybe skip to some of your analytical numbers because that might be something, I mean, it's up to you, Chair. I didn't know.
So yes, I think we all have a pretty good idea in our minds what space is available. The two or three options we had for Site 1, And yes, I'm all for just, let's go through those numbers. Basically, what we want to do is, I assume we're going to own this slide
Yes.
presentation soon.
Sure.
We're going to try to move forward with the RFP to have developers look at this land to see if they can make a go of it based on your analysis. So that's where we're at. And if you want to go through those numbers, that might help us develop the RFP.
What I want,
I think,
oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
What I wanted to do, because this consultant team is winding down their time, so part of the value of having them on this Zoom call with your meeting today, if there's any questions or any added clarification, just so that you're all crystal clear about it, so that long after they're no longer around, we can feel like we understood how they came up with what they came up with. So don't be shy about questions.
Thank you. Everybody get that? Don't be shy. Mr. Mayor?
Very
I
shy.
don't think that's the problem.
This is a very shy group.
Yeah. Go right ahead.
So why don't I give a really quick recap of each option, and
Sure.
then Randall, you jump in and talk about the numbers.
Sounds good.
Okay. Yes.
So our study looked at two different sites. Up on top is Site 1, and that's along Crawford Street. We saw a lot of potential for redevelopment there. Whereas down in the south, Site 2, we did not see any real potential for development other than maybe a solar panel farm, which is complicated in and of itself. But any development of retail or warehousing or warehouses or housing or anything is really beset by site challenges, including the floodplain and the wetlands and the access and everything else. So Randall, probably wise to just focus on Site 1 and the few options we have there. Here are some assumptions that I'll just run through these real quickly, Randall.
Yes.
These are just the assumptions that Randall plugged into his pro forma, which we'll talk about in a bit. But so these are the assumptions that you need to be comfortable with when you present this to, in as much as you're going to present any of this information when you release your RFP, which, by the way, you don't need to present all of this in there. It's mostly to inform you of what's possible. And you can select how much of this information you choose to divulge in the RFP as saying, this is our preliminary understanding. You also don't necessarily need to do that, but that's another question. So these assumptions are about the ground lease revenue at 50 cents per square foot. Industrial building costs, 250. Commercial building costs, 350. And then we came up with land values for both Site 1 and Site 2 of $70,000 an acre and $20,000 an acre. And then we have the property tax rate, which is updated. We got that from you guys. And the inflation rate of 4%. So then I'll quickly walk through the options and then hand it over to Randall. Site 1, there's two alternatives. Alternative 1A is a large industrial warehouse facility on the hill. That's a single large industrial warehouse facility. And then running along Crawford Street, smaller format gas station and light retail. Alternative 1B is a hotel accompanied by two smaller industrial or warehouse facilities behind it, and then with the same row of gas station and light retail along Crawford Street. So, Randall, go.
Okay, thank you. We were looking at this from the standpoint of what does the city get out of it? I mean, our focus was, the revenues relative to the city, and so we tried to compare alternatives using very similar measures and that type of thing. So when you have a large facility like we're talking about here, we had building improvements, and then you had the value of the property itself. The area that was, to be leased, we did two options as well. We had a lease option and a sale option. Sale option is shown later. But if it were to be leased and that's where we got the 50 cents a square foot lease rate. The land value, you can figure what the property taxes are based upon the value of the land and the assessed value of the warehouse. So when you compare all of that, you find that the lease rate, or the tax rate, which actually decreased from the first time that we did this, it comes up with a set of numbers, almost 1.4 million the first year. This is, again, to the city, growing because of inflation to 1.9 million. Now, the good news was we put this in a spreadsheet, and all of the little assumptions that you saw there were they were variables that we can change. And so 4% inflation, well, that might be 6 or 8%, it just depends. But we have the ability to change that. We didn't want to, we thought that it may come back down over time. But in any event, we wanted to be realistic, and a 10-year cumulative value of roughly 13.6 million. Now, if we inflated that value, it grew to 16.3. Given the size of this type of facility and the density of employment, we came up with about 160 jobs. So that was our, for alternative 1A, that was our warehouse situation. This is a nice rendering of it. Very large facility there.
Yeah, and this just shows the intended character of the concept design, which is to reinvent Crawford Street, if you will, with a pedestrian plaza, small format retail. There's not a lot of space to work with there before the hill starts to drop off in the back. So we had to be creative with parking and things like that.
Luke, that was a December picture too, wasn't it, with the flowers there and
well, December 2022, yes, not this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yes.
And then grading. So then here's 1B.
Okay. So 1B, essentially all the same things. If we skip down to the bottom line, so to speak, there's a 10-year cumulative value of 14.8 million, which is actually more than what we had before, and 17.8. So this option is slightly better. The only issue here is that there's slightly fewer jobs because the hotel on a square foot basis doesn't require, it's 10 fewer than we had for if it was all warehousing. So really it's a minor difference, but again, you're probably going to be at the mercy of the developers as to what actually happens. But this is what we're looking at as a pro forma.
And then it might help if we jump to, I think if it's okay with folks, we can skip these alternatives because we don't see them as feasible. But the one slide I did want to get to, well, here, I don't know if you wanted to speak to these sale slides, land sale.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, if you were to sell the property, we made some assumptions about that. The good news is you do get a property tax on the sale of that property. We were already counting property taxes for the improvements, which were the buildings, but now you get the property tax on the land itself. And if you sold the property, we were looking at, and then again, this is at $70,000 an acre, and you put that in some sort of annuity for the airport. At 4%, you would be able to spend roughly, and again, this is just a 10-year average, over $150,000 a year on airport support projects. Again, because FAA requires that any money that's made off of airport property, whether it be sale or lease, that money needs to go back into the airport. So this airport, the money here would be supporting whatever projects you would have on the airport. They could be operational or capital, for that matter. But in this case, the 10-year cumulative revenue to the city is $12 million, and if you inflate that, it's 14. Now, just one thing here, and that is the land value annuity goes away after 10 years because that's the distance we had. So really, it would be, the 11th year, you would not have the 153,000. But again, we were looking at a 10-year horizon, and this, gave you a pretty good idea of what, the city could gain from this.
And then the last slide, I think we can share. This summarizes a lot of what Randall just walked through in a relatively accessible, comparative way. So
yes.
If you see Site 1, you have 1A, which is the big warehouse, and 1B right below it, which is the smaller warehouse and the hotel. So you can just compare these numbers, and really, and then the land sale is here. So, so in a nutshell, what you have are dollar figures that are generally comparable. I mean, they're a few $1 million apart, but they're in the same ballpark.
Right.
Which means so the amount of money you can pull in is one question. And so then you got to think about the other questions relating to whether you lease land or sell the land, which is, do you want to maintain control of the land? Do you think that developers would be interested in it if you wanted to lease it instead of sell it? There's a lot of questions that come up when it comes to comparing selling and leasing beyond just the dollar amounts.
And to be fair, most developers are not interested in a 40-year lease, for example. They would want to own the property because they can own other property elsewhere and have that control over it. So that is a consideration where this, at least this gives you have an idea of what that value is relative to the leased land right here as well. I guess with that, I mean, we did do, the bigger report did talk about, the hangar space that was going to go on aeronautical property, and we did, a little bit of an analysis on that, and that's the first thing that you see up there with 80,000 square feet of hangar space, and what those revenues would be to the city cumulatively, the number of jobs and so forth. For Site 2, which is the south side, the only thing that might make sense was a solar farm that would be elevated because of the flood issues, and whether that was possible or not. There is, for that property that we're talking about, the city already has a tax on generation of power. That's how they do it. And so this is sort of what it would do if some developer would come in and put that in. So that was our analysis of that. Guess we could open up to questions.
Yeah, just one quick question. You had the open strip mall gas station scenario up on the hill with very little space because of the banking going downhill. Where was the proposed parking for that?
Let me back up a few slides. The idea was to park in the rear, which you see in a lot of places now, which is rear parking. We couldn't quite make that work because of the constraints to the rear of the buildings. So it's a bit zoomed out here, but what we've done is we've put shared parking lots in between the footprints of the buildings.
Yeah.
Will help to reduce the amount of curb cuts. You have shared parking. This shows 2 access points, but this could easily be 1. So the idea is to have as few curb cuts as possible, and basically insert the parking between the buildings.
Okay.
We tried to make it work to put it in the back, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
As far as,
okay. Yeah, I just driving down the street, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't see that working either, but thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted one question on, just kind of clarification in regards to where we were thinking of putting the solar farm. You were stating that that property there is in a floodplain. Well, the whole airport's in a floodplain. You realize that, right?
Yeah.
If any of our major dams within the city broke away, everything's draining to the airport. Anyways, my initial question was, are you stating that in that site too, where we're going to set up the proposed solar farm, are you saying it's not a good idea, that that land really shouldn't be developed? Or, you know, move forward in anything that we kind of look at? I mean, we understand that the only access to that property is a bridge over the river, and that's kind of crazy. Who's going to maintain that? That's either going to fall on the responsibility of the airport, the city, or whoever. But I just wanted a clarification. That land is developing, can be developed, right?
Yes. So I guess the answer to that question is somewhat nuanced, but I think we'd agree that building buildings that could be occupied by people that would need to drive there is quite beyond the realm of feasibility, because you'd have to build this bridge.
Yeah.
And either it's here or it's located over here, which is perhaps more expensive. But either way, it probably cost prohibitive alone. Beyond that, the entirety of this site is in the floodplain, and you have wetlands here which constrain the development as well. And those are the major constraints. There is also FAA height restrictions, but you'd still be able to, if that was the only constraint, I wouldn't be too concerned, because you could still build these out in a sloping upwards. But really, it's the floodplain and the access that constrains development. Now, with regard to the solar farm, we drew this option out just to see what sort of acreage of solar panels we could fit there. Assuming that you wouldn't need to build an access road to service this, and that you could access it over the runway with service vehicles, because there wouldn't be a lot of traffic going out there. Then, I mean, is it feasible? I think it becomes, the floodplain presents issues, and how much that means it's infeasible or not. We're not really able to say at this point, but we feel that it would add cost to the project, as you would probably have to include infrastructure.
Yeah, Luke, didn't we determine that, I mean, if you were building a building there, you would have to raise that building 10 feet or so, you know, the whole site 10 feet just to get out of that problem. And
yeah,
so
the floodplain is the floodplain elevation is about 10 feet above the grade at this area.
Right.
So ostensibly you would want to raise the solar panels to be out of the floodplain.
Right.
And beyond which it presents issues about cut and fill and stuff that you would need to do in order to...
So developing that section there, whether it be a structure, it's going to be considerably a lot more work to lay a foundation, whatnot, only because of the wetlands that are just close to the river, and where that kind of just lays out on the airport. We understand that's the lowest point, you know, and, you know, it's something for us to think about, but I just wasn't sure if you were saying, yeah, maybe nothing should go there. I see it as being developed. You just verified it now. It can be developed properly, so I thank you for that.
yeah, and
no problem.
if you go to the beach, you'll notice that there's houses on stilts, and you know, if somebody could perfect something like that, you know, maybe that's an option there.
Yeah, and what I would say about this is, you know, you asked, is it possible or not? To me, nothing's ever impossible without, it's a matter of dollars and permitting.
Right.
So this would present permitting issues for sure, and it would probably add a lot of costs to whoever is funding the development of the solar panels, who might rather do it somewhere that's less constrained.
Absolutely.
Luke, I had a quick question, if I could.
go ahead,
Maybe it's a
Rachel.
bit of a repeat of what you just said. I just want to make sure I'm clear, and thus for the sake of the commissioners. So the natural topo presently of that area is roughly 10 feet below what it would need to be to not be affected by the floodplain. So improvements, in this case, even a solar array, because that's a physical investment. Someone's putting equipment there. Even the solar array would likely need to be raised up because whoever's building it wouldn't want their investment submerged in a worst-case scenario. So it's not to say that a solar array couldn't happen, but the floodplain being 10 feet below, what the grade would need to be, that is a unique challenge to that area.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions?
We're good.
I would just add, I would add that if the airport has been in communication with solar panel energy infrastructure developers, I wouldn't necessarily halt those conversations. I would make this a question that you pose to developers. Like, look, we understand it's in the floodplain. Do you guys know solutions to work around that? It definitely makes it more challenging, but I wouldn't say it's impossible. We can't say that right now based on this.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand that the land across the street has got a leg up on us, too. So if we're going to attract them to do a solar farm there, they're going to want something for it in the form of less money for square acreage. So, yeah, we certainly appreciate the look at and, the understanding that the ground level is supposedly 10 feet underwater in a historic flood. So that leads us to the Site 1. Yeah.
Right.
So if I could, I wanted to thank both Randall and Luke and their teams for these end products. I think that they are useful. It's certainly information that we didn't have prior to this project, and I imagine it will be a good informational guide for the commissioners in the airport and the city moving forward. So thank you very much. And even though she wasn't able to log on, she's still in another meeting. I want to thank Amanda Gregoire and Mass Development for funding the project.
The commission as well. Thank you very much. This information is priceless. I'm glad we did it.
Excellent.
And hopefully we can move forward, whether it's a leased warehouse or hotel or something like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Last thing I'd say is if you move forward to go towards the RFP, let us know, and maybe we can help make some connections, stuff like that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Very much appreciated.
Thank you much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Item F, RFP 7 to 9 hangars.
We're still waiting the input from Mr. Sheffels.
Okay. Pete's Store, item G, the Pete's Store.
Can we do G and H together?
We can.
Because they both fall in the same category, and now we've got the mass development input. We should be ready now, not to go just to the Pete Store or Convergent Energy, but to go out with an RFP.
Yeah. Yeah, I would suggest that when we do create an RFP, we need to put some incentives in there. Just thinking out loud, and not to get into great detail, but, I would be in favor of a hotel.
I like that
I
idea.
think a hotel with a restaurant, or a hotel that overlooks the airport, or some kind of even if it had rental space in the hotel for rental car, or something that could, benefit the airport in addition to having a hotel there. So these are all things that, certainly need to be discussed, but moving forward with an RFP, I think there should just be some incentives in there for potential leaseors.
Just an additional comment, if I may. I spoke to George Pantelli of the FAA about this. And he said, you will not sell that land. That's what the FAA said.
Yeah.
You will not sell that land.
I thought we weren't eligible to sell airport property, only lease.
We can sell it, but if we do, they're saying that you may lose all your grants, they may want the money back and everything else because of the existing, what happened in the past, where the city actually gave property away against the FAA regulations, and they don't want to go through that again.
Right.
We will not sell our land.
Well, they really hold a grudge.
He was adamant. He was adamant. He really was. So, and with respect to the solar farm, we know that people want to go to the solar farm because somebody wanted to come in and give us $30,000 a year for it.
Yeah.
But we wanted 300,000, and we said no, not at this time, if you remember.
Yeah.
So people are interested in the solar farm.
So there may be government incentives in the coming years that could absorb some of that cost to erect the farm 10 feet above, or somebody wants to take a chance and put it right on the ground.
Solar farm people realize they're going to have to elevate all their arrays? And
No, not yet. Right.
Well, they're not stupid. I think they
Right.
do.
Right.
I think they do.
Yeah, I was unaware of that. I didn't realize that the airport dipped.
I mean, we could put an RFP out there and tell them what we know.
Yeah.
There's no harm in no one responding, or someone responding. We don't
Right.
know.
I'm sure that there's enough companies out there that someone would be interested, for sure.
It's possible.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, there's a lot easier pieces of land out there as well,
Oh, yeah.
or building roofs. All right. Let's move on to item I, Stephen Dyke.
I am awaiting a meeting with the mayor, the HR director, and the chief of staff to the mayor on Stephen. They wanted to discuss staffing at the airport. So I believe that's what it's about.
Okay.
But the mayor's left, I believe, so I can't ask him.
Yes, he had run home.
So the commission's, you need commission's input on this? Or,
No, you voted for it, remember?
yes, and it hasn't
Give him the
happened?
benefits.
Okay.
And now it's gone the next step to go to the city, and they're trying to avoid, too much here and there and everything, and just let's sit down and bang it out, I believe.
Okay.
So,
All right. Thank you. Item F, financial review, approval of commitments and abatements. Anything to report to the commission this month?
there is nothing other than that I asked for a document from Munis so that I could go out and contact the people that weren't paying the bills.
Yeah.
And I went out, and the 4 people that I first of all went to said, we're completely up to date. And they were completely up to date. So the Munis system is still being perfected to its final point, and I'm just waiting for that to happen. And then once they're sure, 100% sure that what they're giving me is correct, I will go out and chase. So
Okay, so
no abatements yet.
they reported
No
errors,
approvals or
but they in fact are not errors?
No.
Okay,
No.
thanks. Executive session, again, in order to have an executive session, we have to let the public know that there is one. There isn't one tonight, so no. Date and time of next regular meeting, February 15th, 2023, at 6 p.m. at the Legislative Building. Please note, our regular meeting adjourned at
1921.
7:21. All in favor, or roll call to adjourn? Aye.
Aye.
Very good.
We're good?
Okay.
Meeting adjourned, 7:21. Thank you, everyone.